Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're unpacking a feeling I know almost all of us have had after a particularly brutal commute or just a really stressful week. You know, that sudden, overwhelming fantasy of just quitting your job, throwing your phone into a river, running away to some isolated farm and raising ducks? Yeah, that one. Why does modern city life feel so incredibly draining? Why do these places, which are supposed to be the epicenters of human progress, leave us feeling totally depleted? Well, grab a seat, because we're going to explore the hidden architecture of our exhaustion.
Okay, let's dive right into this and ask the ultimate question. Why has the city transformed from this vibrant hub of civilization and culture into an absolutely unbearable burden for so many of us? Honestly, it feels like no matter where you live right now, whether it's a massive global metropolis or a rapidly growing local capital, the noise, the traffic, just the sheer friction of daily life, it's pushing us to our absolute limits.
To really understand what's going on here, we have to look at the numbers. Right now, roughly 60% of humanity lives in urban areas, so the easy, immediate assumption is that overpopulation is the sole culprit, right? We think, well, of course it's exhausting, there are literally just too many people. But our source material completely challenges that assumption. It actually suggests that sheer numbers aren't the root of the problem at all. The real issue? It's a massive historical failure in urban design.
Which brings us to our first core theme: escaping the city crowds. This massive design failure we just mentioned has created this highly relatable modern burnout, essentially making us believe that a healthy life requires completely isolating ourselves in nature just to, catch our breath.
And what's super fascinating here is how modern real estate perfectly capitalizes on that exact frustration. You've seen the ad campaigns. They sell us this illusion of escape, like a quiet, walled compound far, far away from the city center. But here is the massive irony highlighted by our sources. They sell you an isolated refuge, sure, but they simultaneously normalize the lifestyle where simply leaving your house to buy a bunch of fresh parsley requires a grueling commute. You've got to merge onto multiple highways, navigate toll gates, and survive these massive parking lots, literally all just to garnish your dinner. It's wild.
So this brings us to a major historical pivot. The city built for cars rather than humans. There was actually an exact moment in time when urban planning stopped serving our natural walking pace and started serving the dimensions and storage needs of private vehicles.
And this comparison brilliantly illustrates that shift. Think about historical pedestrian cities. Imperfect, sure, but they were built for walking, for impromptu social exchanges, and for deep human connection. Then compare that to the modern car city. To accommodate all these vehicles, roads were widened, sidewalks practically vanished, and the spaces where people used to naturally gather and interact were just paved over. We basically traded human connection for vehicular efficiency, or, well, at least the promise of it.
If we trace the timeline of urban space, it's actually incredibly revealing. Look back at Paris in 1853. It was redesigned by Haussmann for a bourgeois lifestyle, and honestly, to make it easier to control riots. But crucially, it remained totally walkable. Fast forward to the mid-20th century, the private car arrives, shrinking pedestrian spaces across the board. And present day? Cities have morphed into these sprawling networks of gridlock, exhaust, and unlivable noise. Think about that. In just about 60 years, our walkable environments were almost completely obliterated.
Which leads us directly to the illusion of speed and suburban sprawl. The political ecologist Andre Gores pointed out a really massive paradox here. We rebuilt our entire world around the car because it promised to save us time, but instead, it actually forced our cities to stretch dangerously far apart.
Let's move along and see how this builds into what Gores calls the automobile trap. It's a vicious cycle. Step 1, early car owners have empty roads so they travel super fast. Makes sense. Step 2, mass adoption happens, which causes severe congestion. Step 3, to fix that congestion, cities sprawl outward to make room for more roads and parking. And Step 4, the trap snaps shut. Your commute to work now takes exactly as long as it did when you walked or cycled decades ago. But now, it costs you gas money and pollutes the environment. We didn't save any time at all. We just added immense cost to our daily lives.
But, the physical traffic is really only half the story. Welcome to alienation in cement cities. The sources emphasize that by stretching our lives out across these vast distances of asphalt, we have fundamentally fractured our social relationships. We've totally isolated ourselves from our own communities.
So the crucial point here is captured beautifully by the philosophy of Richard Sennett. He argues that navigating these disconnected islands, like your home in the suburbs, the distant shopping mall, your isolated office park, it actually forces you to constantly switch personas. You end up wearing a new transactional mask for each zone. Because these areas never overlap, you never get to just be your whole self. It's an exhausting, fragmented way to live, and it breeds this really deep sense of not belonging anywhere.
And this fragmentation has fundamentally downgraded our cities. Just look at this shift. We moved from the cultural city, which was all about a shared identity, a cultural catalog, and deep community ties, to the utilitarian city. Today, a city's success is evaluated almost entirely by its business metrics and real estate investments. Relationships have become purely transactional. Essentially, the modern city has taken on the cold, incredibly functional structure of a massive corporation.
And make no mistake, this sprawling, car-centric system isn't just some accident. It serves a massive economic purpose. The automobile is essentially an economic anchor for the global energy sector. By designing cities with these sprawling layouts, urban planners have ensured our absolute reliance on oil and gas. In this utilitarian model, basic daily survival, getting to work, buying food, dropping the kids at school, literally requires you to burn fuel. It guarantees continuous consumption.
So we have to ask the question, where did creativity go? When we pave over our communal spaces just to build drive-throughs and highways, we end up starving the organic, artistic inspiration that used to naturally flow right from the city streets.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the concept of the pedestrian muse. True art requires surprise. It requires human observation. Walkable streets directly inspired literary giants like Edgar Allan Poe, Balzac, and Virginia Woolf. You simply cannot replicate that kind of spontaneous energy in a mall, where literally every experience is identical and predictable. Even today, the source notes that modern artists, like groundbreaking rappers for example, emerge from dense, historic neighborhoods with vibrant street cultures. They aren't coming from quiet, sterile, gated suburbs.
But is there good news? Yes, actually. We are seeing a return to pedestrian cities. There's an emerging global pushback right now against this car-centric planning. People are getting dedicated to reversing this damage and totally reimagining our urban spaces.
As we look toward a post-car future, the shifts are pretty undeniable. Major European nations are actively closing down their central streets to cars, replacing them with bicycle lanes and pedestrian walkways. But hey, it's not just Europe doing this. Even massive auto giants like Toyota and Mercedes are investing heavily in models for car-free cities powered by renewable energy. Why? Because returning to walkable, human-centered spaces isn't just some trendy luxury anymore. It's a profound psychological and economic necessity for our survival.
Which brings us to the ultimate crossroads we stand at today. As you think about your own daily commute and the place you call home, you really have to ask yourself, are we going to fight to save our vibrant, human-scale cities, or are we just going to keep expanding, isolating ourselves, and building highways to nowhere? The design of our cities literally shapes the design of our minds. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I truly hope it changes the way you look at the streets outside your window.